at the end of the day, the only father I could really look to is my father. And, teaching young boys to be young men, like, you need a male space for that. Now, when I was in Cub Scouts, I had a female troop leader because she was the only parent who was willing to do it. But we still had the fathers get involved. And then when I got to Boy Scouts, we had all the retirees in the area who stepped up to be scoutmasters because they knew at that point, it's you can't have women supporting, but you need men to guide the boys.
Yep.
And, that's the hard truth of it. Like, if you want a generation of men raised only by women, it's different. And we see a lot of that now. That's why you have so many, men, look at the Black community, for example. You have a lot of men who don't know how to properly be men because their moms took care of them and they took that for granted. Mm-hmm. They didn't know how to treat women. They didn't know how to treat each other. And they don't know how to be men when they have children.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show.
Well, happy Saturday there, folks. Brian Nichols here on another episode of the Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by our phenomenal sponsors, Amp America, also our phenomenal studio sponsors, Cardio Miracle. Folks, we're going to talk more about that later, but for today, we're talking about all of the news that's happened over the past week, the news you need to know. And joining me here from Amp America to help me do so, Remso Martinez. Welcome back to the Brian Nichols Show, Amp America Week in Review. How you doing, buddy?
It's another day. It's another Saturday, and I've seen so many degenerate memes about one of the people we're going to talk about today that I have I have so many questions, and I've done very little to really look into it because I'm almost afraid of the truth. But to kind of get things kicked off on the right foot, I'm going to ask, did Tim Walz rape a horse?
Well, there's the question
about that. I seriously, I'm not setting you up for anything. I genuinely, I don't want to know. Do you know anything before we get into him lying about having served in combat? Do you know anything about the horse jizz memes?
I've seen the horse jizz memes. I candidly, Remso, didn't dig into those memes for understandable reasons. So that's where I'm at.
My search history is already weird enough, and I have a legit answer for everything on there. But I didn't know how to Google this one. I didn't know what to look for.
You don't want to necessarily Google something like this. I'm sure the search results would definitely yield you some questionable outcomes, and your wife would definitely ask some questions as well.
Yeah.
Okay. On that happy note, let's move away from the horse jizz and let's move towards stolen valor, shall we? Tim Walz, Remso. Tim Walz apparently is facing some, reality check, and that is you can't just have your entire history wrapped up in a nice, neat bow and then slapped in front of the public and expect them to just say, yep, that's it. Looks like right now, yes, the vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, Tim Walz, he's facing a lot of red flags right now from folks specifically in the armed forces talking about stolen valor. And Remso, you wrote an article over at Amp America saying there's maybe a thing or two that Tim Walz can learn from someone like, I don't know, Senator Richard Blumenthal. So Remso, talk to us. What's going on there?
So within hours, it wasn't even days, it was hours, people start picking this guy apart. And since he had been on the short list from the DNC, of course, the RNC went ahead and did their research, and they were prepared for everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and put a cork in that right now and come back to it later because it matters. But right now, people are going after Walz because Walz served in the Army National Guard in Minnesota, and that is not up for dispute. He did serve. He went in as an enlisted soldier, went up to be a higher level NCO, Command Sergeant Major, I think, for his battalion, and that was it. He got out after around 18 years. That's not in dispute. There's records for that. He did serve in the National Guard. What's in dispute, though, is claims that he fought in Iraq
in
and
service,
Afghanistan.
like in combat.
Yeah, like he was actually, combat arms and served overseas in a combat environment. But any soldier, anyone that has served remotely in the military for 2 seconds and has looked at photos beyond generic, like stock images of actors wearing uniforms incorrectly, the question is like, where's the CIB? Where's the deployment patch? When his unit deployed, he got out a few months prior. And the media is playing semantics with it. They're lying about his stolen valor claims. He served in the military. Yes, he did serve in the military. Stolen valor largely is falsifying military status, saying, I served in the military when I didn't. It also, and we can actually thank Barack Obama for this, because Obama went ahead and actually expanded the definition of stolen valor and actually put out legal penalties for people that did this. It's not just saying you served in the military, but you didn't. For example, I was a National Guardsman. I was an Alabama Guardsman as an enlisted man, and I finished out my time in the military as a lieutenant in the Virginia Army National Guard.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a true statement. However, I never deployed overseas. I could say something like I served in an active duty status, which is true. I served in for riots, for the 2016 presidential inauguration, a couple days here and there, but I can't stretch it to say that I was on extended active duty or something like that.
Right.
That would not be true. I also did not deploy. My unit did not deploy to a combat theater while I was in. So I could say one thing is true because one thing is true. But if I began to embellish my military record and say that I did things I did not, that's part of the definition of stolen valor. And that's what he's in trouble for today, because he's been caught on camera, not once, not twice, not thrice. He's been doing this for well over a decade. And he has gone as far as to say that he's carried weapons of war in war and all this other stuff. So we know that he's a lying sack of shit. Apart from all his terrible policies, because he's Huckleberry Marx in many ways, he's just a liar. But the thing that I pose in this article and why I go ahead and drag in Dick Blumenthal in this is that, do we actually think, now I'm not saying that he was not like the top candidate. He was obviously not the top candidate. Apparently there were 9 other people that Harris's team reached out to and asked, will you be her VP? And one of them said, I think this was in CNN, they said that this would be a death sentence for my career. So obviously they went through a lot of freaking people before they landed on, this dude. But the question is that did they look at this guy not knowing that this was an issue, not knowing that this would be the thing that people are talking about the moment he stepped out? And, the Democrats are serious people. They knew this. I think the best example of the vice presidential vetting that people can go watch right now to see what the process is like.
Hey, folks, I want to take a moment to talk about something that has truly changed my life, and that is Cardio Miracle, our incredible studio sponsor. Now, I'll be honest, when I first heard about Cardio Miracle and their claims about improving heart health, I was skeptical. But after using it for just about 2 months, I was absolutely blown away by the results. First, my blood pressure went from being consistently around 140/90 to a much more healthier and manageable 120/80. And my resting heart rate dropped from the low 70s to the high 50s. And I couldn't believe it. But the benefits didn't stop there. I started sleeping better, and I felt more energized at the gym, and my heart felt the best it's felt in years. And it's not just me. Hundreds of you, our amazing listeners, have reached out to share your own incredible experiences with Cardio Miracle. So, what is Cardio Miracle, and how does it work? It's a carefully crafted supplement that harnesses the power of nitric oxide to support optimal heart function. So, by increasing nitric oxide levels in your blood, Cardio Miracle helps relax your blood vessels, improve circulation, and it protects your heart from damage. It's like giving your heart the support it needs to function at its best. And here's the best part. We've got an exclusive offer just for you, our loyal listeners here at the Brian Nichols Show. When you head over to cardiomiracle.com and use code TBNS at checkout, you'll get an extra 15% discount on your order. Plus, with their 100% money-back guarantee, you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. So, if you're ready to take control of your heart health and experience the life-changing benefits of Cardio Miracle for yourself, just click the link in the show notes or video description. Trust me, your heart will thank you. And don't wait another day to prioritize your health. Join the tens of thousands of folks who have already discovered the Cardio Miracle difference. Head to cardiomiracle.com now and use code TBNS for 15% off your order. Your journey to a happier and healthier heart starts today. And now, let's get back to the show.
Is the movie Vice
Good
about
call.
Dick Cheney?
Yep.
When George Bush and everyone's team is looking at the VP list and they're looking at Cheney. That's actually a really good example as to what goes behind the vice presidential selection process. So there's no way that they did not know this was happening. And the media coordination for a lot of this also shows that they were prepared for it. And I say that because you have people that are trying to turn this into swift boat veterans for truth against John Kerry and stuff like that. But the truth is like, it's a very different environment. The swift boaters for truth against John Kerry during the Iraq war is a very different situation than right now. And I highlight Dick Blumenthal because Blumenthal served in the Marines. To be more specific, he was a Marine Corps reservist during Vietnam. However, he never served. He never deployed. But Dick Blumenthal went ahead and called himself a war veteran and stuff like that. Like, I've got an active duty wartime ribbon, or I think that's what it's called. Like, I didn't get many in the military. I wasn't in that long, but like, I got an active duty wartime ribbon. You know what you get from that? That just means that you joined the military during an active time of war. And during the global war on terror and everything, that's what me and everyone else got just automatically. So when you go ahead and you look at these guys and you actually see what they did, like the proof is in the proof. They did not serve overseas. They didn't get a Bronze Star. They didn't get Purple Hearts. At least John Kerry had a Purple Heart. No one can deny that John Kerry served in a theater of war, that John Kerry sustained serious injuries. And that's where I get upset with some Republicans who go after John Kerry. John Kerry did serve. John Kerry was injured. John Kerry earned his Purple Heart. However, the extent of the war stories caught up to him, and they were like, John Kerry wasn't this Rambo type guy. He embellished a lot of his acts of bravery and stuff like that. So it's like, this stuff always comes back to hit you. And I say this as a veteran, like veterans will go after other veterans hard. But this whole thing has gotten to the point where it's like, if Republicans think that this is going to be what sinks the campaign, they shouldn't. Because Dick Blumenthal, who's one of the highest ranking members of the Senate, he was able to get through this, and he won. He won several races since where people called out his stolen valor record. Donald Trump in 2018 even brought that up. Dick Blumenthal's still around, and all of his opponents, no one remembers their names. No one remembers them. So it's still, even though we're less than 100 days out until the election, it's still a long way. This could be forgotten tomorrow. So, they came prepared for this. They know what's happening. I'm glad that people are shedding light on it, but they can't just run on he lied about his record, because the Democrats don't care. The Democrats are fighting against Hitler and everyone else. And, it's one of the situations where it's like the news cycle changes immediately. The people who said that after Trump got indicted and he was going to win indefinitely turned on him like a week later. They're like, oh, he did something stupid. His campaign is failing. Then he gets shot in the ear and they're like, oh, there's no way he can lose. He's going to win. And now like 2 weeks later, he does a live stream of somebody and they're like, oh, his campaign is failing. He went after Joe Rogan. His campaign is losing. And it's like, calm down for like 5 minutes. 5 minutes, please.
Brian Nichols and Remso Martinez here on a Brian Nichols Show, AMP in America Week in Review. We're live, by the way, folks, here on Saturday morning. So if you want to go ahead, head down below into the comments. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your perspectives. We will possibly read them as we wrap up towards the end of the episode here today for some super chats. So please go ahead, leave your comments here, Twitter and Facebook, X and Facebook. Remso, you mentioned, and I think, so first of all, you talk about the stolen valor, right? And I had this question. This was a question you actually kind of, you answered the question before I could even ask it. I was like, does this even matter to the Democratic base? It doesn't, right? I'm right there with you. I don't think this matters at all. But to the large voter base, by and large, I also don't think it really matters that much. To your point about Richard Blumenthal, a lot of folks, they really only care about the things that really impact them, right? So if it's the economy or if it's their lot, like their family, their community, like those things you can see, smell, touch, taste, like those are the things that really matter. And for this, it just feels like it's another one of those like attempts at trying to create like this perception that he's not an ethical or trustworthy human being, when we have to remember the potential voting base, the IVP, as we call it here in the show, the ideal voter persona for that Democratic voter. They don't care. That's not one of those qualifiers for them when they're going to the voting booth. Now, another thing I just wanted to kind of circle back to, and is this like reoccurring theme of these older, I'm just going to use the term boomer politicians, right? And their fish stories, their big fish stories. And across the board, what we've seen is this old boomer mentality of, telling your story and then you're just embellishing a little bit every so often. Only to the point where you start your story 20 years ago and it turns into you caught a whale, 20 years later versus, well, maybe it was a minnow. That used to be like, okay, well, that's just Bill. That's just Bill telling his stories. Whereas now Bill's running for office and there's the internet. So these big fish stories that boomers used to be able to get away with, and one look no further than Joe Biden back in the 80s when he was trying to rip quotes from like JFK and Martin Luther King, trying to put those quotes in his own speeches.
I throw it in the piece too. Like this is no different than Hillary dodging bullet fire in Bosnia. This is
running to the airplanes. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Brian McWilliams on NBC getting shot at in a live combat zone. Yeah.
I'm an equal opportunist too. I brought up, Ben Carson's stabbing story about how he went to stab
I forgot that one. Can you share that for the audience for folks?
And this is in the movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. It's in the book Gifted Hands, his memoir. It's when he was like 8 years old. And somebody was bullying him, so he pulled out like a pocket knife and attempted to stab somebody. But he said the guy's belt buckle was so huge that as soon as he turned around instead of stabbing him, I stabbed the belt buckle. And it's like, for years, people didn't really question that. And then they did. And Ben Carson could have said anything. Instead, he was just like, I don't want to talk about it. And then
he's like, I just imagining Ben Carson in a violent position, like, I'm going to stab you.
And I mentioned Ben Carson, and I like Ben Carson, but I bring that up because it's like, everyone, because I bring up Joe Biden being raised in like a Puerto Rican neighborhood and having only black friends.
And rubbing having the kids rub his legs when they're in the pool.
For the Democrats reading the piece, they'd be like, well, Trump lied all the time. And I'm like, well, we could argue that. And there are examples, but it's like, let's take like the non-controversial politician type who everyone kind of typically has like mostly positive feeling towards and be like, listen, like everyone lies. And I opened the piece of that. Like everyone lies. We're humans. We lie. I breathe. I lie. Like we're not perfect people, but to counter your big fish story, you could call me out for saying that I thought I caught a 20-pound salmon and I caught a minnow, and I could call that subjective. I think for a lot of people, it does bother them when you say you served in war and you didn't. And I had a guy that I served with for a little bit. He got kicked out, but it was Veterans Day, and we were going to do a parade. And I don't know why he got into an argument with somebody, but he started arguing with them about like the war in Afghanistan or something. And then he was like, you don't know shit about Afghanistan. I've been to Afghanistan. I fought in Afghanistan. And I looked at him and I'm like, you and I have been in the same time. And last I checked, neither of us have been to Afghanistan. So everyone kind of corners this guy. And we're like, we're going to give you a chance to walk back that statement. And then he's like, well, I got a little heated. It wasn't me. it was my cousin in the Marines, and it wasn't Afghanistan, it was Iraq. And, you know, I just got heated. And it's like, you don't get heated and then say that you served. And that guy, I'm not going to go into details, but like we razzed the fuck out of him. Like, we gave him so much crap for that, because it's like, you just said that you served in Afghanistan, and all of us who have known you since day one know that that's not a true statement. And you weren't joking either. You said it attempting to win an argument that you were losing. So, you know, there's well, to me, it felt like 20 pounds to when I fought in Afghanistan. It's like, calm down, buddy. Calm down.
I mean, yes, it is absolutely subjective. I think for the big fish analogy, but when you just outright lie, right? And that, I think, to your point, there is definitely a group of voters who this just outright lying immediately disqualifying. But and I get nervous, Remso, when I look at the politically, I don't want to use the word inept, more the politically agnostic folks who just, they live their lives and they really don't pay attention to this stuff. I'm concerned that voter, they won't even look into this. Like, top of the ticket's important, right? We know that. Trump, Harris, that's where a majority of the voters are going to spend their time. I just wonder how many of those voters are now going to take that next step, turn that next page, read the story about Tim Walz and get the context and say, yeah, that right there, that's disqualifying. And I was considering voting for Harris. Now I'm absolutely going to say, no, I'm not voting for Harris. I might vote for Trump. I might vote for RFK. I might not vote at all. That's the voter I'm concerned about, because I don't know if they're going to really dig into this and really see that this is something that would push them away from voting against what they looked at, as you said, right? The next Hitler, the next worst thing in Trump. And that's exactly what the media has done, by the way. And we've seen this ever since Harris took over the campaign, when Biden just disappeared and went off to the farm where they're inevitably going to put him down. Like, you watch firsthand, media is playing their shed one time. Good time. The media is literally like walking Kamala down the aisle right now, trying to get her into a position where she can just be ushered in as president. And they've asked zero tough questions. They've asked zero questions at all. And to see that, right, Remso, you have a press that is lapdogs for the Democratic Party. I mean, they're basically an extension of the communications team for the DNC. You have a populace that is so overloaded with information, and frankly, they're burnt the fuck out after years and years of just the temperature being increased. Like, he's the next Hitler. It's Russian collusion, COVID, Trump. Like, it was always back and forth, just always increasing the temperature. That person, I just feel they're burnt out, man. And I'm concerned that it is the burnt outness and the fact that then the media, who's supposed to get that person to wake up and snap out of their burnt outedness, if that's a word, they're the ones who are in turn ushering all of this right down their throats. So I'm a little weary. I hope things get better. I don't know. Let's put a bookend on this conversation, Remso. Any last thoughts to wrap up the stolen valor conversation with Tim Walz before we go to our next article?
Yeah, there are only two. There's only one set of standards when it comes to the Democrats, and that's double standards. This is swift votes for Kerry. Even beyond that, this is, you know, leaving your secretary under the bridge in Chappaquiddick, and people will still vote for you with Ted Kennedy. You know, I mentioned in this piece, right? I think this spring there was a Republican commissioner for this county in New Jersey who embellished his naval record. He did serve in the military, but he said that he was a Navy SEAL, and I didn't go too far down that rabbit hole. But like, long story short, like, either he wasn't a Navy SEAL or he never deployed with the SEAL teams, and because of that, his own county GOP demanded his resignation.
Good for them.
So, like, Republicans will go after themselves hard.
Good for them.
Democrats will just look at this and be like, what does it matter in the face of infinity? What does it matter? It's like they'll just get away with it. If the day that Ted Kennedy left his secretary to drown, and then he yelled at his own staff for yelling at him as he had a hangover the next day after he slept overnight in the motel with no regret on his face whatsoever as he did that staged interview. Like, You know, that man served until his deathbed. And even
Yep.
after he died, they used Do It for Ted to bring Obama back in 2012.
Which
So,
is so fucked up. Like, just like remove the politics, remove the D, remove, that's what she said, remove the R. Like, just as a human being. And if that was your sister, that was your aunt, your niece, your best friend from high school, whatever it may be, just have some like humanity for a second. And that is something where
Democrats cared as much about Mary Jo Kopechne as they care about all the black children who were aborted every day.
and that just, you drop it, buddy. We'll let that go right there. I'm not even going to carry that one forward. We are live, by the way, folks, here on Saturday morning. Thank you for joining the Brian Nichols Show, Amp America Week in Review. Brian Nichols here with Remso Martinez. We're streaming live on X.com, Twitter, as well as on Facebook. If you're in the stream here, go down into the chats, leave your comments and your thoughts. We might go ahead and check them out as we wrap things up today. But first, Remso, I'm going to ask you a question. Are you feeling trapped in the uncertainty of today's world? Maybe, are you worried, Remso, about your, I don't know, financial future? And what about your personal freedom?
Every day.
Okay, well, how about this? Imagine, Remso, imagine waking up every day. You're stressed about your tax bill, as you said, your investment returns, and the growing restrictions in your home country. We feel it every day. It's exhausting, and the reality is it's only going to get worse. But what if there was a way not just to break free, but to help legally reduce your taxes, protect your life, wealth, and live your life and your family's life on your own terms? Does that sound pretty good, Remso?
That sounds like a pretty good deal, Brian.
Oh, well, boy, do I have something for you. This is time. That's right. And introducing the Expat Money Summit 2024. Your tickets to reclaiming your freedom abroad is a free online event. It's bringing over 40 experts together with decades of experience in international living, investing, and wealth protection. Speakers include, I don't know, Dr. Ron Paul, Doug Casey, Mark Faber, Tom Woods, and more. So October 7th through October 11th, you can, at this free summit, experience how to obtain a secondary residency and citizenships, legal strategies to slash your tax bill, exciting investment opportunities into new markets, and tips for mastering the expat lifestyle. Folks, do not, under any circumstances, let the feeling of being stuck and powerless overwhelm you. Join over 8,000 freedom seekers at the Expat Money Summit here in 2024. Reserve your free tickets today at expatmoneysummit.com. That's expatmoneysummit.com. Your journey to financial freedom and a life without borders starts today. One more time, expatmoneysummit.com. All right, folks. Yes, we are live here on the Brian Nichols Show, part of Amp America. We're doing our week in review, going through some of the top news articles over the past week. Now, elephant in the room. I was out all this past week. I've been traveling for work. I was in Nashville. Got to see, we like to joke, we get to hang out with 1,800 of our closest friends at the Partner Summit. So had a good time there. Got to see some old friends, made some new friends. But candidly, Remso, I haven't been as involved in the news as I would like to. And then I ended up just coincidentally, we're standing at the table and this guy comes up and he is the troop leader for his Boy Scouts club over in Utah. And we started talking and yes, it's no longer elephant in the room. It's no longer Boy Scouts. It's just Scouts or Cubs or whatever the hell they call it nowadays. And it's because back a few years ago, there was this whole DEI push to un-Boy Scout the Boy Scouts. So now you have it's the Scouts USA. You have boys and girls in one entity, and then the Girl Scouts have their own entity. So we got to talk about this. Let's talk about the Boy Scouts. Why the Boy Scouts have vanished. This is an article that we have over at Amp America, and let's just dig into this here, Remso. Why did the Boy Scouts fail? Oh, I don't know why it's not loading, but it's a video. That's why.
Actually, yeah. Can we watch the video? Is there a chance we could do that?
Yeah, let me make sure. Here, I'm going to unshare my screen. I'm going to reshare it. Make sure we have our audio here.
Yeah, because I could explain it, but Nick Freitas does it a hell of a lot better.
There we go. Here we go. Oh, you know what it is? Here, Remso. I got to copy. You fill the time here, Remso. I'm copying a link.
Yeah, so male spaces are under attack in America, and male spaces have been demonized and targeted by people for years, because the idea is if something is a male space, there's something inherently wrong with it. It's toxic. It's the smoke-filled room. The only way a space could be legitimate or something can really be good is if women are allowed in. And, I get this with a lot of things, and, people would say this is a non-issue, but like, I'm part of a fraternity, and this fraternity does not allow women in. And we have not allowed women in forever because we just don't allow women in. It's a male space for women. And we have stuff for women. Like we include our wives at dinners, and we have functions for families, and we have an appendage that is just for, women to support us. But like we're a traditionally male.
Men have an appendage too, Remso, by the way.
Oh, and it's like that boxer who's not a woman, who's not a man, but is a man apparently. So like, with Boy Scouts have been, targeted for more than a decade and a half. And the fact that they had their will broken down, I think it was in 2013 when they started allowing girls in.
Yep.
The problem is like, if you wanted to expand it because women wanted to be involved, my problem was never, don't allow something like this. I had been one of the people saying like, if you want to have boys and girls in the same scouting type thing, then have it be scouts. So in one way, it's like, I'm almost glad that, they're no longer pretending to be Boy Scouts with women. They're just going to be scouts. However, as a former Cub Scout and Boy Scout, I can definitely say that there's just something different about being a young man who's doing stuff with your boys. Yeah, I think the same thing is for, the Brownies and for the Girl Scouts. And, my wife was a Brownie, and she said we never got to do as cool stuff as the Boy Scouts, to which I'm like, okay, well, if you want to do Boy Scout things in Girl Scouts, I absolutely support women learning archery and women learning leather work and women learning the Boy Scout skills, but have that be for Girl Scouts.
Yes.
Because it's less about the things. It's more about just developing. Yes. And I think that there's everywhere you go, you can do stuff co-ed, but there is something very genuine and very important about allowing boys to be boys. And the fact that we have yet again taken that away and demanded nothing of women.
Bingo.
And I think that women are selfish. And I'm going to say this, I'm going to sound misogynistic and horrible, but all the focus right now for equality and for protecting women is in women's sports, which I absolutely believe. Men should not be in women's sports. But at the same time, girls should not have been in Boy Scouts. And the women pushing for that never defended Boy Scouts. And that's what upsets me. But Nick Freitas went ahead and did a video here, which is probably less problematic than what I just said. So
there we go. It's 3 minutes long in length. Let our good buddy there, Nick Freitas, who also is part of AMP America. He's got a great show over there. So let's let Nick give his thoughts.
Why did the Boy Scouts disappear? On May 7th, 2024, the Boy Scouts of America announced that after 115 years, the organization would change its name to Scouting America. So, why did the Boy Scouts abandon their old name? And in order to understand this, we need to understand why they were formed in the first place. Starting in 1910, the Boy Scouts emerged from a need to save lost boys from city slums, teaching them virtues like patriotism, honesty, courage, and self-reliance. Its founders envisioned an organization that combined a boy's craving for heroism with a code of chivalry, all wrapped in the lure of the great outdoors. The early Boy Scouts understood that masculinity was both self-sacrificing and ennobling. And this spirit of duty and selflessness was at the core of what it meant to be a scout. And for well over half a century, the value of an all-boys organization was self-evident to pretty much everyone. However, beginning in the late 60s and early 70s, things began to change. In just one generation, America witnessed the subtle disintegration of traditional family structures. And this collapse of the family was accompanied by a devaluation of traditional masculinity. And culturally, positive male role models practically disappeared from TV shows, being replaced by men as either idiots or villains. Politically, the state and federal governments decided to actively promote one sex at the detriment of another. And amidst these massive social changes, the Boy Scouts faced increasing pressure to adapt. The push for relevance began in the 1970s and 80s, leading to the first wave of erasing the original purpose of the Boy Scouts. Woodcraft skills were replaced by things like urban survival tips, and scoutmasters became little more than camp counselors. By the 1990s and early 2000s, the writing was on the wall.
Yep.
The Boy Scouts of America was deemed too wholesome, too patriotic, and above all, way too masculine. Ultimately, the demand for tolerance and inclusivity became the organization's Achilles heel. Left-wing advocacy groups and legal challenges pressured the Boy Scouts to drop their emphasis on raising boys, change their hiring practices, and eventually renounce the very purpose of the organization's existence. By 2018, the Boy Scouts of America had renounced its mission of developing selfless, self-reliant men. The final step in this transformation was the removal of boy from the organization's name. The Boy Scouts' shift toward inclusivity and diversity came at the expense of its core mission and values. The original Scouts were dedicated to outward focus, universal ideals, and selfless values. They were patriotic and volunteer-driven rather than being encumbered by bureaucracy and identity politics. So here's the question. Now that all these changes have taken place, are boys better off now that the Boy Scouts have abandoned masculinity? What about girls? Are they better off? How about society in general? The answer is no. It turns out that an organization dedicated to teaching boys about the proper role of masculinity within society was better for everyone. And erasing it was better for no one.
And
do you have a why you would like us to answer?
Here, Remso. So this for me as a girl dad. So for folks who aren't aware, I had a little girl back in 2023. If you didn't realize, which by the way I did, but if you didn't for whatever reason realize that there is an inherent difference between boys and girls, have a kid, because that difference will be so transparently obvious that you can't ignore it. And this is the part that crushes me when I see what's happening to young boys right now, is that there is no, pardon the term, there is no safe space for boys. There is no place for boys to go and hang out and be boys. The extent of what's left, Remso, is your sports teams, right? On your high school and your college teams and your professional teams. But even still, that is starting to be creeped into. Like you talked about boys going into girls' sports now, in the name of inclusivity. We're seeing a destruction of what makes us different, and it is those differences that make us special. Like, go back to The Incredibles. I watched The Incredibles back in the day, one of my favorite Pixar movies. I made sure my little daughter, she watched it as well, and we were on vacation back last month, and as we're watching The Incredibles, there's that one famous scene with Syndrome, and he's laughing, he's just walking away, and he goes, because when everyone's super, no one will be. And that's what's happening right now. When everyone's equal, no one will be. You want to have those special things? Too bad, because those special things give you an advantage, Remso. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring you down a level. And maybe those folks who need a little hand up, we're going to push them up a little. But what happens? No, we're bringing everybody down and maybe just a little bit up, but we're collectively going further and further down away from the things that make us special versus saying, hey, the folks who need some help, what are the things you guys do great? Where can we help you differentiate? I'm in the contact center space. I work with contact center companies all day long. And if I were to bring a massive contact center company to the table to one customer and then bring a small hole in the wall provider to the same exact customer, the positives and negatives of each of those providers as it pertains to that customer's needs are going to be so stark, because the big provider is going to be able to do anything and everything, but that small provider probably has one or two things that they've identified is like a really cool value add that the big provider either offers but doesn't do it really well, or is like, is that really worth us digging into, investing into? We're just going to let those small providers do that. And guess what? That's a chance for that small provider to double down and make that valuable service or solution shine and be different, and use that difference to help propel them forward. And I've seen this time and again, man, when like you have these small providers in this space, they start to do something unique, something special, and they completely disrupt the market. But if we didn't create a situation where you were, let me rewind that. If you create a situation instead where you're bringing that large provider down and trying to bump up that smaller provider, you're now just getting rid of the actual differentiators that actually matter, that hold the big provider in check and actually give the small provider a competitive advantage. How does this all relate to diversity, equity, and inclusion with the Scouts? Because you're taking away the very important, unique things that are brought by both men in their camps and women in their camps. I was just having this conversation, 2 days ago with a girl I met at the summit. We were talking about like childbirth, and I was like, that's a freaking superpower. You create life. Think about that. You make people. you are a Xerox machine for human beings. How insane. I know. How insane, though, that that's your superpower, and that people try to make it so that you are just a birthing person, getting rid of that really, like, that special thing that makes you as a woman. And men, we are the protectors. We're the providers. That's something special inherently as a dude. And it's this assault on what the roles were and why they were there to create this just big blob of gray, this equality in the name of equality. It is destructive. It moves us backwards, and it doesn't hold up in the real world. And when you try to push this shit on folks in the real world, there are real world consequences, and not in the best of ways, which to where we are today, Scouts America facing the lowest enrollment numbers they've seen ever. And we've seen a just collapse of masculinity, confusion and tension between the sexes, and things are objectively worse for both the Boy Scouts, Scouts America, and the Girl Scouts, because now the Girl Scouts, which were their own unique thing, are now starting to find that their demographic, young girls, are now being split. So now those girls are going to Scouts America or to the Girl Scouts, thus helping decrease the value that that individual organization is bringing to the table. So I will get off my soapbox now, Remso, but it is so important for us to get out of the and this is the online world, right? The groupthink world that we see. We find ourselves in our bubbles. You say something controversial, you get shouted down by 50 different voices in your own little echo chamber because that's not principled. And it turns into, okay, I guess we can't talk about this, and we're going to let this cancer fester until it explodes and becomes a really big issue. This is a really big issue. We have to talk about it. We have to be willing to talk about it, and we have to be willing to let other perspectives that aren't in line with the contemporary, like 3x5 card of allowable opinion. You got to be able to allow different voices come to the table and challenge narratives. So that's my thoughts on the Boy Scouts. Any thoughts you wanted to add in there, Remso? Anything I missed?
No, I agree with everything you said. The only thing I'd add is, like, this is not an attack of co-ed spaces.
No.
I love doing certain things with women. And
it's understanding that there are spaces, though, that are important just for dudes and just for chicks.
And I mean, this was really, and I mean, Nick Freitas really brings up in the video, like, this is for teaching young boys how to be young men.
Yes.
And, my father was in the military. He was active Army, and he deployed all the time. My first memory of my father, and I mean, this sounds bad, but like, my first memory of my dad was when I was 7 years old. I know that my dad was around. I knew I had a father. But my father was deployed in Korea. My father was constantly, moving around and stuff like that. My parents were married, but, my mom was an Army spouse. My dad was gone a lot. My mom had to pick up a lot of the masculine father role as well as the mother role, because she was essentially a single parent for like 7 years. Until, we moved and he got a different, position in the Army, and like, we saw him more often. But like, my mom could not be my father, and expecting my mom to be my father was hard on my mom.
Expecting your dog to be your cat, or your goldfish to be your cow.
But at the end of the day, it's like, even though my mom was the parent that had the primary function of raising me in my life, at the end of the day, when I still had to look at what a man is like, I still had to look at my father.
Yep.
And it's not to discount anything that my mother did. My mother had, my dad was deployed in Iraq, Afghanistan. He had several year-long deployments in Africa. Like, my dad was gone a lot during my childhood.
Your dad served in Korea all the way through up to Iraq?
He was in Korea in the 90s. And
Oh,
then,
okay.
like,
Okay.
yeah,
I'm
no,
like,
no, no, no.
Your dad was in
Everyone-
the
everyone
Korean
does,
War
like-
in the 1950s.
No. Everyone in the military who's active duty does like a Korea or Germany deployment. But my dad, like, usually they're there for 1 year. My dad was in Korea from 1993 to 1995. He flew back to where I was born in Arizona to see me be born for like a week, and then he was back in Korea. And then from 1998 to 2000, he did a 2-year tour in Korea. And then, we were around for a while, but then he was in Iraq during the surge. He was in Iraq for 15 months. And then he was in Afghanistan for, I think, 13 months. And then he went ahead and did a 15-month deployment in Afghanistan. But that doesn't also cover all the 2-week to 3-4 month long schools and tour of duties and everything else. So, like, my dad was gone all the time. So while my mom had to be the father, at the end of the day, the only father I could really look to is my father. And, teaching young boys to be young men, like, you need a male space for that. Now, when I was in Cub Scouts, I had a female troop leader because she was the only parent who was willing to do it. But we still had the fathers get involved. And then when I got to Boy Scouts, we had all the like retirees in the area who stepped up to be scoutmasters, because they knew at that point, it's like, yeah, like, you can't have women supporting, but you need men to guide the boys.
Yep.
And, that's the hard truth of it. Like, if you want a generation of men raised only by women, it's different. And we see a lot of that now. That's why you have so many, men, like, look at the Black community, for example. You have a lot of men who don't know how to properly be men because their moms took care of them and they took that for granted. They didn't know how to treat women. They didn't know how to treat each other, and they don't know how to be men when they have children. And
By the way, you ever see that video? And it's like a breakdown of just how to easily understand the difference between men and women. And it's like 2 golden retriever dogs, and there's like a bunch of puppies. And the puppies are all wild and crazy, and the mom German Shepherd's like roof, roof, roof at them, trying to get them to stop. And then the dad German Shepherd goes roof, and all the little dogs are like, they just sit. They're quiet. They sit, and they don't do anything. That's nature. Like, I'm sorry, feelings don't care about your nature. I'm almost turned to Ben Shapiro. Facts don't care about your feelings.
I had somebody once say that he went to school for psychology at Virginia Tech, and his liberal professor wanted to do a nature versus nurture experiment. So he experimented on his daughter. He took away all of her dolls and gave her only trucks, and she was like 4 or 5. And then one day he came home and saw her cradling a semi truck and holding like a small little car in front of it. And he was like, "Sweetheart, what are you doing?" And the little girl said, "The mommy truck is trying to talk to baby truck."
Yeah. Dude, no, but that's the thing. And we try to understand it. It is inherent in who we are. Like, my daughter is trying to like nurture a baby bear. She's 16 months old. She hasn't been programmed or like conditioned by society. But this is just it's there. It's inherent. It is part of who we are. We'll leave that where that is. And actually, this is actually, Remso, funny enough, a great segue to our next topic. A reminder, folks, you are joining us here live on our AMP America Brian Nichols Show Week in Review. We're looking at some of the top stories here from the past week. I hope you are enjoying today's conversation. And if so, please head to the comments. Let us know your thoughts. And if we get some stuff wrong, well, of course, you have to tell us what we got wrong. But Remso, we're going to go ahead and check out this last article. This, it's same church, different pew. This kind of goes back to what we were talking about here, the differences between men and women, but a little bit in terms of some social, standards, the stuff that you're supposed to, I'll say supposed to. It's tradition. It's stuff that we kind of look at and we say, yeah, isn't that just normal? And that is, men, you should be the ones proposing to chicks. And we just saw this at the Olympics. We had a female Olympian. She what'd she get, like bronze or something when she finished the race, and then she went over. And as it says here in this article by Michael Knowles over at the Daily Wire, she then got onto one knee and proposed to her long-term boyfriend. So Remso, where is Michael right? Should women not propose marriage to men, or is this just a like anti-woman backwards perspective from Mr. Michael Knowles?
I might juxtapose myself compared to everything I just said in the previous segment, but I think he misses a question in the article, which is why would a woman want to do this? And
why would a woman want to do this, Remso?
I see this a lot with my female friends who are like career professionals and stuff, and they want to go ahead and they want to get in a relationship with somebody, and then they end up being in a relationship with them for years, and there's no real guidance as to where the relationship is going. And when you ask them, it's almost become like an inappropriate question. And I get it, because people used to ask this to me, which is, and I was with my wife for 7 years before we got married. Like, here's the thing, like, and I explicitly told her, I want to marry you. I do. I'm broke and I live at home and I didn't have a job at the time. So like, I was very upfront about it. It was like, I want to marry you, but I have to be able to support myself so I could support you. So like, I was very upfront about that very early on, and she held on until we got married 7 years later. We've been together since 2015. We've only been married for 2 years. And people are like, oh, you're just in your relationship. I'm like, man, like, I was dating this chick when we had a black president. Okay. Like, I was dating her during Obama term too. So like, we've been around for a minute, but, you know, for going back to some of my friends, it's like, they're waiting for their guys to go ahead and propose to them. And they're yearning for it. And for a lot of them that are like in their early 30s, pushing, you know, mid 30s, they're like, man, like, there's a clock on this shit. Like, you got to lock it in or let me know. I think a lot of men, because, you know, what you've seen, especially post pandemic, is there was a bump in marriage. There's a slight decrease in divorces. But when you look at the last 30 years, divorces are still at historically high levels. Marriages are still at historically low levels when you look at it big picture. But with this, I think a lot of men are avoiding marriage for many a reason. And I think, to kind of tie into the last topic, it's that I don't think men think of themselves as men, much like many women don't think of themselves as adults. I think there's a lot of people who are like, well, am I adult enough to get married yet? But the thing is that men are the ones that are dragging on marriage. And ultimately, I don't think there's a problem if the woman wants to propose, simply because if she's been in a relationship with you, understand the value of men goes up with age. The value of women, just in like the dating market, just goes down. And I'm not making a judgment on that. That's just how it is. Younger women will go for older men. Younger men will not go for older women. Older men will go for younger women. That's just how it is. So if you've been in a relationship, and like, they've been in a relationship for some time, this athlete, for her to basically say, listen, man, like, I made the question easy for you. Do you want to marry me or not? It's good that he said yes. I wish them nothing but a happy marriage and a fruitful family and fruitful life. But like, it shouldn't have gotten to that point. I don't see this as a judgment call on women, and I would not begrudge a woman who did that. What I would say, though, is, do you want to be the man whose woman proposes to you?
Right.
And it's nothing on her. Like, good for her for knowing her worth and for making a stand. Like, are you going to marry me or not?
Yep.
So I don't blame the women in this situation at all. I think that more women actually, if you're in a relationship, maybe not drop down on one knee and propose, but define the relationship. Be like, dude, are we getting married or not? Like, what is this? And what I hate right now is, of the Zoomers and some millennials, the term situationship. And this is how I tell people, I've been out of the dating market for close to a decade now. And it's like, I don't know how this thing works. Like, I met my wife at a party in college, like, as like, you know, old school as it gets. I met her at a party in college. But I have a friend who was in a situationship, and I was like, what the fuck is that? And she's like, well, we're a thing and we make out sometimes, but we're not like exclusive and we're not really dating. I'm like, oh, so, you know, we used to call that having a fuck buddy. And they're like, no, we're not that. We're not there yet. You know, we have some boundaries. I'm like, oh, so like, this guy is taking you on not dates. You're making out with this dude. You only hang out with this dude. But okay, I'm not going to judge you because you didn't fuck him yet. It's like, okay, call it what it is, but you know, they're never going to move on to anything, because if he as a person has said, listen, I'm interested in you, I care for you, I like you, I want to be exclusive with you and see where this goes, that's a failure on men. Men have failed in that.
So I also see that there is, going back to our previous topic, the lack of masculinity in modern men to know what you're supposed to do. What does leading as a man look like? Now, back to your point, this is not to be like trying to discriminate or trying
This
to
is not the He-Man Woman Haters Club.
no, we're trying to explain how we got to where we are, right? And it starts with acknowledging reality, that there are fundamental biological differences between men and women. That's not trying to be insensitive. That's just being real. So when we take that as the starting off point, that there is 1000% a biological difference, then we also have to talk about, okay, well, with those biological differences, what is happening societally that's pushing men to not act on those biological drivers? And in this case, one of those biological drivers is to lead. Men are bigger, stronger. They that is a physical difference than men, which by biological design puts them in a better position to lead. That's why I forget the stat, but how many presidents are 6 foot tall or higher, right? Because there is this biological thing inside of us that looks to big, strong, tall men as leaders. We have to stop saying well, it shouldn't be that way. It is. That you can try to make it different, but there are reasons that men have traditionally had those leadership roles. Now, is that to say that women shouldn't have leadership roles? Not at all. And that's the part that we have to stop with the knee-jerk reaction of, oh, you mean this? Well, it's the Jordan Peterson. So what you're saying is, right, with the Kathy Newman interview. That's what happens when we have these conversations. So we have to go back to men. You have a role in society as men, and that's okay. Your job is to help lead. Your job is to be the supporter, the person who is putting themselves, yes, in harm's way many times, but you're doing so in defense of something greater. It is your family. It is the traditions. It is the values, right? And to try to keep society moving forward. And this is something, Remso, I would love to get your thoughts on this. Is there something inherently missing when we're talking about advancing society from a woman's perspective? And I'm asking you, obviously, as a woman, but with that in mind, right? Is there something where men, we see the future? We see 2 generations, 3 generations ahead. And I'm where we are today, I have to build X, Y, and Z in order to help set that generation up for success in the future. Is there something inherently missing in that mindset when it comes to the opposite sex? And if so, where is that discrepancy coming from? And is there something we can do to fix it?
I have I come from a family of extremely strong women, and the one thing that
do they lift? How much do they bench?
Well, one of them, my great grandmother, and I did not know this until she passed away about 2 years ago. My great grandmother was a WAC. She was part of the Women's Air Corps in World War II.
Damn.
So they flew domestic patrol flights along the coast of the United States, looking out for German U-boats. But she went on to become an educator. She was a teacher. She was a principal. And I think eventually she became a superintendent for a school district near Orlando, Florida. And, my great grandfather who died was not a good man. He was not a good man. Serial cheater, had many children with many different women, was not good to his children, was not good to his grandchildren, was just not a good person. And he was not good to my grandmother. And that's an example. My great grandfather is an example of a man who failed to be a man. And I'm not popular with my family for saying that, but it's true.
Yep.
But
we all have them, man. We all have those folks.
He was not a man. He just wasn't. But my great grandmother, while she took on a role during wartime, of all things, she still she would pack lunches for when my grandmother died. My father was the eldest in his family. When my grandmother died, my great grandmother was the one who packed him lunches. My great grandmother was the one who tutored him after school. And she allowed my grandfather, who's still around, as he was being a single father, to all his credit, she allowed him to be the father. And while she may have, disagreed with him or something else, or wanted to do something different, she understood it's I'm not replacing their mom for, my dad's siblings and stuff, but they need a female force in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And she allowed my grandfather to be the father, and she took on that female role in their life. And I think that's one of those things where when I look at it, like, I look at my mother had to take on the father role. And I was hard on my mother as a child and a teenager and as a young man, even when I was in the military and stuff. Like, my mom got conditioned to a role where she was like, I have to be mom and dad because dad is working, because dad's at war, because dad's doing something else. And it wasn't until she kind of started to like calm down as my brother and I became adults and everything, that now my mom has really stepped more into like that nurturing, feminine mother role. But like, she was doing what she had to do. And I see that for fathers that have to take on the mother role as well, widowers and, fathers who have wives that are high net worth individuals. And it's in a position where they agree that one parent has to stay at home and take care of the kids, and the father takes on that role. But I think it understands knowing who we are. Mm-hmm. My great grandmother could be a whack pilot. She could also be the woman who makes your grandson a sandwich to make sure that he goes to school. And, like many of these things can be true at the same time. When I was a soldier, and I never said it publicly then because I didn't want to get in trouble, but like I was not for women serving in combat arms roles. I was not for women being in special forces selection. I was not for women being able to go to Ranger school. That's not the same as women cannot be in the military. A lot of my favorite people were women in the military. I just said, I think that those roles should be men roles. Everything else can be an equal playing field. And, many of my favorite officers who were MPs, who were combat medics, who were engineers, who were, in charge of like, convoy groups and stuff, were women. But when it came to those specific things, I was like, I don't think women should be Rangers. I don't think women should be Green Berets. I don't think women should be infantrymen. But that's not saying women should not be soldiers. So I think, if you drift one way or another on these things, those things can be true. But at the end of the day, men are men and men are women. And it goes beyond biology. It goes beyond expectations and who we're wired to be. And people can take that from a religious point. They could take it from whatever point they want. But men are men and women are women. And we can only do the things that we were born to do. We could do a lot of things, but we will always do better at the things we were born to do.
Here. Remso Martinez, we're going to put a pin in today's conversation for our week in review. This is Brian Nichols and Remso Martinez, AMP America, Brian Nichols Show week in review, going over all the top articles here from this past week over at AMP America. Plus, we brought in a special article from Daily Wire from Michael Knowles. I don't know why I'm having trouble with his last name today. Michael Knowles. It must be I'm tired. It's a Saturday morning. And yes, by the way, folks, we're sorry. We didn't get the chance to do this live on Friday. We usually do our Friday mornings, but hey, life happens. I was in a car driving back from Nashville. So here I am today with Remso on a Saturday morning, and I've been seeing folks jump in and out here of the live stream. Great to see. So thank you for joining with us on a bright and early Saturday morning as we were talking about, yes, our week in review. Now, folks, as you know, here at the Brian Nichols Show, we have 3 shows per week. On Mondays, we do our guest interviews. So this past week, we had Chad Stewart here on the show. He was talking all things creating awesome stories outside of the traditional Hollywood infrastructure. How do you do that? Go ahead, check out that conversation. Great episode there with Chad. On Wednesday, we had a little overview of my Brian's briefings talking about how to get out of your groupthink, how to get out of your echo chamber, and the dangers therein of being stuck in an echo chamber, specifically to libertarians, not liberty Republicans. I think they kind of get it, but libertarians, both big L and the small L libertarians who maybe are politically homeless. That episode is particularly special for you. So please go ahead.
You want to see something funny, Brian?
Yeah, well, please show me something funny.
Oh, shoot. Where is it?
As long as you're not bending over.
This is happening in real time. Where is it?
As Remso's finding it, here we go.
This is just a final thing. This show and tell. I got like 4 of these trading cards.
Of course,
it's the Donald Trump survives assassination.
How much did you spend on that? Please tell me.
I bought 4 of these for like $90. I got them as gag gifts. I'm giving this to my barber who collects. I'm gonna get a haircut after this. I'm giving this to him. He collects trading cards and stuff. And I'm like, like this is. I have no point to make. I just wanted to show it because I thought it was funny.
So what they need to do is, I'm not sure for folks who play the Pokemon trading card game back in the day, which, by the way, I was one of those nerds. Let's create like a politics trading card game, like Trump assassination attempt. Take 10 points off your leader or something like that, and then like Trump
my Blue Eyes White Dragon would be Dick Cheney in the woods with the shotgun.
Bring up Schedule F. That's Trump's like super move, and it nukes out like the entire base of your opponent's deck or something. Okay, Remso, we have a business opportunity here. We're gonna have to dig into Pokemon trading card games for politics. I like it. I like it. Okay. We could have some fun with this. Like,
I actually think this has legs.
Yeah, like a Vivek Ramaswamy card. He's like a sorcerer or like something. He can like use magic to convince people's brains to switch or something like that.
Neocon mage. She just walks around with like Nikki Haley's spine.
You have who Barack Obama. His special is like drone bombing and just like you get to target one of your opponent's players. But because of the excess of casualties from the drone bombing, you also end up removing some of your own cards. There's a lot of fun we could have here, Remso.
Clinton suicide card where your character kills itself with no explanation.
Clinton suicide. Go to your deck and remove 3 cards.
Secretary.
What's the John McCain card? Do you want to cover that one?
Oh, that's about to get really like controversial.
On that note, we'll take it off air. Folks, this has been a great conversation. If you want presidential trading cards, let us know down below or send us an email. Email me, Brian at briannicholsshow.com. You can reach Remso at remso@marketerontherun.com. I got that right, Remso?
Yes, you did.
Look at me. It's like I've been doing this for a little bit. Hey, Remso, you can find him on Twitter, on Facebook, otherwise Instagram at Go Remso. You can find yours truly at B Nichols Liberty, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. If you enjoyed today's episode and you are watching us live on Facebook, on Twitter, give us some love. If you want to catch the episode afterwards, because maybe you join halfway through the stream and you're like, what the fuck were they talking about at the beginning of this to where they are? We're talking about presidential trading cards. Don't worry. We got here. We climbed up this mountain and somehow we ended up at Pokemon trading card games for presidents or politics. So if you want to see how we got here, head over to YouTube or your favorite podcasting or video app, YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're uploading the video version of the show in its entirety over there. For the podcast version, obviously, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, wherever it is you get your podcast, you can find The Brian Nichols Show and our Week in Review. And one final plug, Remso, you know what it is. Support the folks who support us. That's our amazing sponsors like our good friends over at Amp America, our amazing studio sponsor, Cardio Miracle Plus, our amazing new sponsor, the Expat Money Summit. If you want to learn more about the Expat Money Summit, expatmoneysummit.com, October 7th through October 11th. It's free. So go ahead, go get your registration put in there. And I know our good buddy there, Mikkel Thorpe, will look forward to having you on the webinar. Otherwise, Remso, any final hanging items for this week, for today's episode? Anything you want
Brian,
to
I gotta start getting some notes down for that political Pokemon. We gotta jump on that, man.
The political Pokemon, the Bill Clinton card is you get to take one of your opponent's bench players and put it on your bench, but it has to be directly below the Bill Clinton card.
The John McCain card is Meghan McCain wearing the face of her father, like Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, screaming, "My dad, my dad!" And you just scream so loud that people could become deaf.
Remso said it, not me.
I will wear the pelt of my father to remind you who I am.
The Joe Biden card is just like a necromancer just holding a dead body by like a puppet.
It's Sleepy Joe. No matter like what state you're in, he automatically moves on to the next round with no
George Bush's card is it's demolition, and you can take down big buildings with an airplane.
Okay, that's way worse than my John McCain one.
Okay, we'll leave it there so we don't get nuked. With that being said, it's Brian Nichols and Remso Martinez signing off here for our Amp America Brian Nichols Show Week in Review. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.